If someone was to ask you who's going to be the best NBA team coming into the 2021 season, you would probably either say the Bucks, Lakers, or the Heat. Well, so far the Heat aren't even top 8, and both the Lakers and the Bucks are second in their conference, so obviously it's not any of them. As you might have already guessed, the best team right now is no one other than the Utah Jazz, who are not only leading the West, but also have the best record in the whole league. They are currently 24-6 and have won almost all of the games they played in the past 2 months, which is really impressive. Surprisingly, the Jazz aren't a team with multiple MVP candidates or a bunch of superstars. Instead, they have close to 9 really good players who could get on the court and drop 20 points on any given night. That's why a lot of people have started comparing them to the 2014-2015 Atlanta Hawks. For those of you who don't remember them or just weren't into basketball back then, the Hawks were a team with 4 All-Stars who ended the season with 60 wins. A solid team if you ask me. So why exactly are the Utah Jazz being compared to the old Atlanta Hawks? Well, that's what this video will look into. First, I'll explain who the Hawks were and what similarities they have to the Jazz. And at the end, we'll decide if the comparison is right and whether or not the Jazz are going to end up having the same fate. So make sure to watch all the way through. Well, let's get started. The year is 2015, and even though it's not talked about nowadays, all the hype was around the Atlanta Hawks. That's what happens when you have one of your franchise's best seasons ever. They went on to not lose at all during the month of January, and because of their huge success, the Hawks ended up having 4 All-Star selections: Paul Millsap, Jeff Teague, Al Horford, and Kyle Korver. The only player on their roster who wasn't an All-Star was DeMar Carroll. Talk about being left out. It's likely that you have no idea who half the guys I mentioned are, and that's due to the fact that they're mostly past their primes or retired. But back in their days, they used to be complete beasts. Or we thought so. They easily finished the season ranked first in the Eastern Conference and were looking forward to making a run at the title. I'm sure by now you're seeing the resemblance between these two teams. First in their conference, multiple All-Stars, franchise records are all things that these franchises have in common. But here's where it gets interesting. After easily defeating the Wizards and the Nets in the first 2 rounds, the Hawks were positioned to play against the LeBron-led Cavaliers in the conference finals, and I'm sure you all can guess how that ended. The Hawks got swept 4-0, and that pretty much finished their historic season. Obviously, reaching the conference finals is no small feat, but for a team who was ranked top 10 both defensively and offensively, it was a bit of an underachievement. With 6 guys in double figures, they had a very balanced roster, along with some solid depth as well as specialists such as defender Thabo Estefan, my bad if I'm saying that wrong, and 3-point sniper Kyle Korver. Even though there was a lot of team success, no one individually stood out enough to win an NBA award. However, Mike Budenholzer, who was the Hawks head coach at the time, did end up winning Coach of the Year. Alright, now that you have a deeper idea of how this 2015 team looked, let's go over the big question, which is this team a good comparison for the 2021 Utah Jazz? Well, let's start with the coaching of the two teams. Both Budenholzer and Quinn Snyder, who's the current head coach of the Jazz, learned the main portion of their coaching from Greg Popovich, due to the fact that at some point they were both assistant coaches to him, which in a way makes both of their techniques very similar. And obviously, the results prove this even more. Just like the Hawks, the Utah Jazz are ranked top 10 in both defense and offense. To be more exact, they're top 5 in both ratings, which is a pretty significant upgrade. If they continue to play this way, the Jazz are also on pace to have 60 plus games won, but they probably won't hit that milestone because of the shortened season. No matter the number, the ratio of wins to losses are still pretty much the same between the two teams. Why is that? Well, just like the old Hawks team, the Jazz are also extremely balanced. As shocking as it may seem, they also have 6 guys averaging double figures, along with great depth off the bench. They have close to 8 players who could be starters, which is why there are a lot of people who are saying that this Jazz team also deserves 3 or more All-Stars. Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert are both obvious options with the way that they've been playing. And with the performance that Mike Conley has been putting up in his 13th season, I personally think that he easily deserves an All-Star as well. Also, let's not forget about Jordan Clarkson, who has single-handedly transferred the Jazz bench and is the odds-on favorite to win 6th Man of the Year. So far, all the similarities were a good thing. But as much as I hate to say it, this comparison wasn't made to prove how good the Jazz are. In fact, it was the exact opposite. Remember the little story about the Hawks getting swept by the Cavs in the conference finals? Well, everything is exactly in place for the same thing to happen to Utah. LeBron James is now in the Western Conference and seems like a likely bet to make it to the conference finals again. Just off the NBA standings so far, I could confidently say that we're likely to see the Jazz and the Lakers go head to head in the third round. That's basically why the Utah Jazz are in comparison to the 2015 Atlanta Hawks, because of how similar the two seasons are playing out. So exactly how likely is it for this to happen? Well, personally, I think that there are plenty of reasons to believe that this Jazz team doesn't have the same fate. For one, you could easily say that they are a better team than the Hawks because they're ranked top 5 in both defensive and offensive rating, which is a huge jump from top 10. And also, let's not forget that most of those players on the Hawks weren't as developed or skilled as the Jazz's roster. As a group, they work great together and could basically destroy any team in their time. But when you look at the Hawks players individually, you wouldn't exactly see superstars. Honestly though, none of those two factors are what truly sets the two teams apart. What actually separates the Jazz is their defense, or more specifically, having Rudy Gobert. Yup, you heard right. Even though he's the most overpaid player in the league, Gobert is still the best defensive player on the whole planet and can pretty much lock down the area around the net single-handedly. This would end up being a game changer for when the roster needs to get past LeBron or any other team with multiple superstars. And looking back, a strong defensive player could possibly be what the Hawks were lacking. Their overall defense was good, while having a single player who could dominate on that end of the floor would change everything. After all this, if you were to put the roster of the two teams side by side, it wouldn't take more than 5 seconds for you to realize that this Jazz team is on a whole another level. My personal takeaway is that even though these two teams have pretty much everything in common, this Utah team seems a lot more legit. Having both a 6th Man of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year candidate could easily put you way ahead of the 2015 Hawks. But add in everything else that was mentioned, and then you'll notice that mentioning these two teams in the same sentence is pretty much a crime. If you have a different opinion on this, leave a comment and tell me what you think. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to drop a like and subscribe so you can get access to all the videos as soon as they're released. Well, that's pretty much it. I'll see you in the next video.